Let's crack open a beer and share some thoughts.
Welcome to Opinions, and it's our end of year extravaganza. And mate, I have been looking forward to this show for almost 12 months.
Extravaganza, is that just a posh way of saying we're drinking some stupidly, ridiculously high ABV beer, Steve?
Possibly, yes. But we're not starting off with one of those, are we? First beer is already in glass tonight, and it's probably a beer that needs absolutely no introduction to a lot of our listeners. But Martin, what is it we're starting off with tonight?
Well, West Coast IPA, Elusive Brew. It has to be Oregon Trail.
Let's dive straight into this.
Yeah,
Cheers.
Cheers. Is that still hitting the spot for you, Steve?
It just ticks every single box, doesn't it?
I wouldn't say every box, but maybe we'll come to that later on.
Okay.
But it is a bloody delicious beer. That balance between the malt and the hops. And
Yeah.
I reckon this is actually more bitter, this batch, than the first batch, which came out.
It is. By all accounts, I remember reading somewhere or someone told me apparently the Andy increased the dry hopping rate to increase the bitterness. So
It's definitely that's there because that is a lasting.
It absolutely shines through, doesn't it?
Bitterness. So yeah, that's if that's what he's aimed for, then he's got it. And again, I think that we've spoken about Andy before. You know, and the title's used about the nicest man in brewing, and it's not without its merit. But he's a fucking talented brewer. I think
Yeah.
I mean, let's and I think this last year to 18 months, some of the small pack he's been putting out has been spot on.
Mm-hmm. With the introduction of his cans as well.
Yeah.
You know, this style of beer in a 440ml can. I know we've spoken in the past about 440ml cans, but this is 5.8%. It's not massive ABV, and actually I want 440 mils of this beer. I'd feel like I was being cheated if I only had 330 mil of this.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I've softened a little bit because, I mean, it's hard over this year to have avoided the 440 can. And, you know, there's some other breweries who'll get a shout out during the course of the show where 440 cans are their way of working as well. But, you know, I still don't necessarily need a 12% beer to be a 440 can. You know, a big Impy Stout or Russian Imperial. 330s. Bottles. That's what I want those ones to be in still. But yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Let's face it, Steve, it's a 440 can. If we were at the tap room, we'd be drinking pints.
To stop me from draining this first beer, well, let's start off as we always like to do at the end of the year with a few stats around the show, because I know a few of our listeners do like the stats that we talk about. So just in terms of the show this year, we had a few celebrations. So we reached our 100th episode of Hopinions right early on in the year. I think it was first or second show we recorded this year, but I know we're going to talk about that show specifically in a while. We reached the milestone of 8 years of the Beer O'Clock Show as a brand and putting out podcasts, and 4 years of you and I doing Opinions, mate. So numbers are rounding out quite nicely there now, aren't they?
Where has the time gone, mate?
Oh, it's just flown by, hasn't it? When I think I've been doing this for 8 years, I'm like, wow.
Yeah. I mean, you've gone not quite nicely past that 8 year mark now. Because that was effectively, it was summertime. So you're closer to 8.5 years of doing this sort of thing.
Easily, yeah.
And, you know, how many episodes did we put out this year, bearing in mind that we started to go weekly for a while?
Okay, so this episode that we're recording now, this is our 38th show this year. So obviously, as you say, yeah, we did go for weekly for a while. So we would have normally aimed towards 26 shows for the year, but yeah, so we've done 12 more as a result of that spell where we went weekly, and that equates to over 2,500 minutes of us talking.
That's bonkers. You sent me that stat a couple of days ago, and I went, "That's a lot of minutes." I mean, a football match is 90 minutes.
Yeah. That's a huge amount of minutes. Sorry, everyone.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, we've featured 52 breweries this year as well. Now, you didn't know I was going to do this next bit, but it's a little quiz for you, mate. You love it when I do a quiz with you.
I hate it when I don't have prep for a quiz.
Exactly. Well, if I told you I was doing it, you'd prep and you'd know the answers. Who were our top 3 most featured breweries? As in, how many times have we featured a beer from that brewery?
I'm going to go Brew York, Cheshire Brew House, Signature Brew.
Okay, 2 of those appear in the top 3. So at the top, Cheshire Brew House, we've featured 9 of their beers in the last year. There is one other brewery who we've featured 9 of their beers, which is Fuller's, but I'm not sure we count that considering we did 8 of those in one show.
Yeah, Hopinions 100 sorted that one out.
Yeah. 7 appearances were Brew York, Neptune and Utopian. And then coming in on 6 appearances were Amity, Anspach and Hop Day, Donkey Stone, Howling Hops and Signature Brew.
Okay. There's quite a few beers from a small amount of breweries then. Utopian I should have got, but I think because I also feel about some of their online launches and stuff. Yeah, but then we always followed up by having the beer on the show, didn't we? So
where possible.
Yeah. No, that does make sense. There's been some crackers in that list though.
Oh, hasn't there just? Well, we've featured across the shows 134 different beers this year, 35 plus different styles of beer. But still, our most featured style is IPA, and I don't know whether we need to make some sort of commitment to maybe trying to change that next year and to expand our horizons a little bit, maybe.
Well, when we get into our review of the year, there might be a few surprises coming up anyway. So let's park that for now. But basically, what you're saying is the beer we are drinking now is the main style that we have featured.
Typical of us, yeah. which is going to surprise not a single person.
No one is surprised. No one's fallen off their chair while listening to this, have they?
No. Across those shows, we've had 23 guests. Now, obviously, we wouldn't normally feature that many guests as a fortnightly podcast because we do try and just feature guests every other show. But again, by producing 12 extra shows in the middle of the year, it enabled us to expand the number of guests that we were able to welcome on the show, and that was a lot of fun chatting to a lot of different people this year, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, that has been a massive plus to how we've started operating by doing this podcast. There's just people there which we may never have got the chance to meet, let alone host on the podcast as a guest. And every guest was a bit different. Every guest brought something new to us. And it's just been so much fun. I mean, if we're speaking about fun, I mean, we can't go any further than speaking about Judy and Les from Neptune, can we? I mean, come on.
No. And people have thoroughly loved the outtakes at the end of that as well.
Yeah. So, it has been, and thank you to everyone who's made the time to join us on the show as well. Whether that just be, other podcasters, people from breweries, guest drinkers, people who listen to the show. It's wonderful. I can open my screen and suddenly I'm in someone else's front room or back room or spare room and having this lovely conversation about a subject that we all love. So it's been great fun. I would have struggled to guess that's how many guests we'd had though.
Yeah, well, not content with doing that many shows and having that many guests, we also appeared on a number of other podcasts as well.
Because there's not enough us on there, is there, Steve?
No. So we guested on Rhythm and Brews this year, which was a lot of fun recording with Andrew and Luke. We were also on Time for a Brew. We both individually appeared on Cabin Fever on a number of occasions as well, and the forthcoming Beer Nation collaboration podcast, which will be with people on Boxing Day, were also sort of down as one of our guest appearances, really. So forgetting East versus West Midlands podcast. Apologies, I did forget about that. Yes.
So that will come up a bit more detail later anyway, but did that one as well. So yeah. Again, did we have to apologise to our listeners again?
Probably. Maybe too much us. Tell us if you think that's the case. Hashtag too much us.
They're turning on other podcasts to not listen to us. And look, we pop up.
Yeah, and there we are. In terms of some of the other stats, some of our numbers, so downloads this year, we've seen a lot of downloads of the podcast this year. So around 35,000 downloads during 2020, and that's across all of our shows. So that's the entire back catalogue going way back 8 years as well. But interestingly, 18,000 of those downloads were for shows this year. So just over half are for 2020 new shows, but it shows that people are maybe joining us for the first time, and then they're digging into the back catalogue to have a listen back to some of the old bits as well.
Which we've all done that when you find something. If you find something that you like, you decide to go back. You may not listen to them all, although I know some of our listeners have, but you find something you like, you think, oh, I wonder what other episodes they've got. Is there anything like leaping out that I might enjoy? So no, that's brilliant. And, again, people taking the time and trouble to download as well. I know from my point of view that as a podcast listener, 2020 has been a bit of a challenge for me to listen to all the ones I want to, just because of lack of commuting time. Whereas working from home and listening to the podcast is just a bit more harder when you think there's a call coming up, you can't really get into it. Whereas people's commutes generally allow for them to get through a very large chunk of any given episode. So again, thank you for everyone who's still carrying on downloading the shows, listening to the shows. And even if you're not downloading it and you're just streaming it because, you're at home and you've got the Wi-Fi, again, thanks. Hope you've enjoyed what you've heard, despite it being us.
Yeah, and it would appear that that's all over the world as well. We've been downloaded in 62 different countries.
That was brilliant. That's the Spotify stats, isn't it?
Year. No, this is still just the downloads from people that subscribe via podcast apps or go onto the website and listen. This is before we even get into Spotify. So yeah, 62 different countries, 72% of our listener base is in the UK, obviously, 17% in the US, which is a slight increase from the last time I looked at these stats. So we are slowly getting a bit more of a listener base in there, but I think most of what we do is very UK centric, so we're probably not appealing to that many people, and 2% in Ireland. So I'd just like to thank Wayne and Janice for continuing to download the podcast and listen to us to account for that 2% of our Irish audience. Episode 100, the Hopinions 100, was our most downloaded episode of the year, which should probably expect, because one, it's had the most time to be downloaded, but two, it was also kind of a landmark event for us as well.
Which is what happens with TV programs. If you like it to anything, when they do an anniversary special, it tends to be their most watched one of the year. It just so happens for us, it was at the very start of the year.
Yeah, it's just the way it fell. Now coming on to Spotify, we're listened to in 27 different countries on Spotify. We've seen 63% growth in the UK this year, 200% growth in Ireland and Sweden. Still don't know who's listening to us in Sweden.
I sent that picture of that stat to my son, and he just sort of sent a laughing emoji back. And I said, can you imagine how me and Steve must sound to the Swedes? This sort of London/Essex hybrid accent coming out. No idea.
Well, if you're one of our Swedish listeners, please let us know. We'd love to hear your feedback. Our followers are up 98% on Spotify, which is great, because I think it's been probably a full 2 years that we're on Spotify now. So it's still early days for us on there, but we're still getting some growth on there, which is great. And listeners are up 51%. Now, obviously, Spotify differentiates between people that follow and people that listen. And you do get a breakdown in terms of people that start and complete and people that start and stop and never come back to it. So that's all on there for us as information if we ever need to use it. And we're listened to in the UK, Ireland, Netherlands, New Zealand, and the US on Spotify. So I think it's great that even 8 years into my journey, 4 years into our journey together, we do still seem to be growing our audience.
I think it's excellent, and I think it keeps it fresh for us. We see that with some of the engagement on Twitter sometimes. A new name will pop up. Last year, when we went to a couple of events, we got speaking to people who only listen to the show. They don't really do social media. So that was literally a face-to-face engagement, but they're still listening to the show. They're still downloading the show. I love the fact that it's still picking up people as we go along. Keeps it fresh. It's encouragement for us as well. I think if people are picking us up and then sticking with it and coming back for more, I think that's a good thing, and it keeps it fresh for us. But it also does give you that encouragement, because I can only imagine when you and Mark first started, you're thinking, is anyone listening to this?
Yeah. Yeah,
literally.
I think we may have actually said it on a couple of early episodes. Is it just us talking to each other?
Yeah. Are we talking to each other, recording it, putting it out there, and then the only people who heard it was us? Yeah. So yeah, I think it's great. And again, thanks to everyone who does download and listen, whatever way they're doing it. I think it's great. And to anyone who's listening to outside of the UK, please do get us in touch, because I'd love to know who's listening to it elsewhere.
Yeah, me too. And I'll just echo that thanks as well. So yes, thank you to everyone for continuing to listen and get involved in what we're doing. Let's take a little look back at some of our favourite shows this year. So we've mentioned Hopinions 100 a couple of times. That was an epic day. The 8-year Fuller's Vintage horizontal, vertical tasting, whatever way you want to call it.
Horizontal by the end of it.
Yeah. Joined by the greatest general manager in Essex, Rich Taylor, who joined us for that show as kind of almost like a bit of a compare to help us along with it. And also because Rich was hosting it in the Vic, I think we felt it might have been a bit rude to have not invited him to join us.
Yeah, Rich, thanks for doing all the setup and supplying some cheese with the beers as well. Can you just go downstairs for a couple of hours? Yeah. But no, it's always a pleasure to have Rich on anyway. He's not just a listener of the show, he's a mate. We've got to know him well over the last 3 or 4 years, and he's a really good bloke. He's working hard at the Vic, and he took the Saturday afternoon out to join us for that. And yeah, that was a crack. It was, because obviously I had to get a couple of trains to get to Colchester these days. And I think it was one of those really clear, crisp winter's days. Because I remember thinking it was actually quite chilly upstairs, but it was perfect for the beer.
Oh, yeah.
The beer was like cellar temperature all the way through. And yeah, to just have a look back at those 100 episodes in a bit more detail. I know we're doing a little bit of review, but to actually think about 3.5 years worth of opinion shows. And Rich did a bit of a quiz, checked our own knowledge about the shows as well. And to sit there drinking 8 years worth of Fuller's. I mean, it's not a bad way of spending a Saturday afternoon.
Not at all. And I thoroughly enjoyed that. And it was great to do those comparisons in the beers as well, to see. Obviously, we know, unlike some other beers where you do vertical tastings, they're not the same beer every year, because they do change the ingredients in the Fuller's Vintage. But certainly revisiting some of those from the past that maybe I was unsure about at the time, and going back over my notes has said, I'm a bit iffy now, but 2 or 3 years and this is going to be bang on. And to see that it actually was, and kind of surprising myself a little, thinking, oh, maybe I do know what I'm talking about sometimes. And in particular, revisiting an absolute favourite of mine, which is the 2018 Fuller's Vintage.
Yeah,
that it was an absolute delight to do that. And yeah, it was a long show, but it was a lot of fun as well. And it was a great milestone to reach. And I remember, interesting, when we did that show, I sat back and thought, fortnightly, it's gonna be a while until we get to show 200, and then we had 16 weeks of doing weekly shows, and now all of a sudden we're approaching show 150 fairly soon. So yeah, I think maybe that 200th episode might come around a little bit sooner than we had expected.
Yeah, I reckon you're right. And I want to give a bit of a shout out to Bon Vu, because I think we took something from the Still and Act tasting that we did.
Yeah.
And I think we tried to apply some of those principles as well to how we were going with the Fuller's Vintage Ale. And I think it actually was really interesting for us to do it that way, because I'm pretty certain we would have gone the other way to what we did, because we did newest to oldest, didn't we?
Yeah.
I think we would have started older to newer without doing the Still and Act during the winter previously with Jezza on the, from Bon Vu. So I thought that was a really good way of doing it. And I do want to give him a shout out, because again, if someone's going to take the time and trouble to instruct and give you a tip, I think it's always quite good if you actually remember to use it.
Yeah. Yeah, totally agree. And yeah, and Jez, if you are listening, we have noted that you've said you've got a much greater range of Still and Act that you want us to come and drink when we can. So we're looking for a date when we can put that in the diary to come to your secret beer bunker.
We may well be looking at summer 2021 for that, but it's on our planning sheet.
But it's happening. Absolutely, yeah. What are some of the other shows you've enjoyed this year, mate? Any real standouts for you there?
Okay, and this won't come as a surprise. Budvar.
Yeah.
Come on, mate.
We are going to talk about that particular trip in a bit more detail, though, a bit later on, aren't we?
Yes, we'll talk about the trip, but the actual recording with Master Brewer number 2, their head of effectively sales and their brand awareness manager from the UK, all the while sitting in a small room beside numerous hundreds of tanks in their cellar and drinking beer straight from the tank. That episode was it was gold, mate. It was gold. I know that we give the caveat at the start that some of the sound quality, because we were in a working brewery, may not be as good as we would have liked it to have been. But I think the content within the show from the guys at Budvar and their hospitality was just off the charts. That's definitely a personal highlight of mine. I guess we'll talk about the adventure in more detail, but that episode definitely, mate. I'm guessing we're probably aligned on that one anyway.
It was a great recording. I really enjoyed it. But this is, I've got a feeling we aren't necessarily going to agree on everything tonight, because I've not got it up there as one of my top shows of the year. Okay, well, I enjoyed the process of recording it, but I think maybe there's a little part of me that's not happy with the sound quality and what it sounds like, the final version of it. It's still a great show, though, and the content and the knowledge that we gained as a result of doing that trip is, you can't put a price on that, can you?
No. Go on. All right. So that was my first highlight show quite early on in the year. What would be your one?
Okay, I'm going to go for the one that probably stands out the most and may not come as a surprise to anyone, but it was a dream come true for me to be able to record with you and Mark at the same time for our 8th birthday show. That was a real kind of moment in times for me, being able to sit down, chat to Mark again, because I haven't spoke to him probably in a couple of years now, and to actually go back over some of the stuff that we did and have you involved in that discussion. And I loved how natural it felt as well. It was a great conversation that we had, but it was fantastic just to have a chat with him again and have him back on the show with us.
Yeah, I mean, it's not in my top 3, mainly because I think that if we did ask the listeners, I reckon it'd be right up there, mate, for all the things that you've just said. And it was good fun, and it did fit. And you're right, bearing in mind that the 3 of us had only recorded once together previously when I was a guest on the original show. It did feel very natural.
Yeah, and it was like coming full circle.
Mark's dryness and his ability to just pinpoint a few things, it was still there. That hadn't changed. Perhaps our 10-year anniversary for the Beer O'Clock show, maybe Mark comes back again.
Who knows what I'm planning for that?
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm putting it on early, because you've probably got a whole separate spreadsheet with different tabs going for that one.
Tonight's show is fueled by spreadsheets, mate.
Yeah. Will the 10th anniversary show be the same year as your 50th birthday?
Yes.
Oh, God, you've definitely got tabs.
Yes,
but it was a great show. And I think it's quite good, actually, that we're finding different shows at the moment. So my next one would be episode 124, which we did with Jules at Hop Hideout. And I particularly like this one because, obviously, we had a few discussions on some of our shows about bottle shops, prices, and that kind of thing. And Jules came in and actually said, put a hand up and said, look, I want to be on the show. I
want to challenge you on what you're saying.
I've got stuff I want to say. I've got stuff I want to share. And that was really good. The insight about her journey and Hop Hideout. And this was even back in the summer when we were talking to her. I thought it was just fantastic. It still made me wonder, blimey, why have you done it? Why have you opened it up? But I just found it a fascinating insight, and the passion and knowledge that Jules brought to that episode as well. You know, I think we say this about a lot of guests. It's great when they bring facts and information, because that's not really our best.
we do our best, mate.
We do our best.
We do our best.
So yeah, that would be in my top three. So yeah, I enjoyed that one. What would be your second in your top three then, mate?
Well, it's interesting you say about facts there, because one of my favourite shows from this year is maybe a little hidden gem, which we did again. It was right at the beginning of the year, and that had nothing to do with facts whatsoever. It was Hopinions 104, which was Fantasy Pints.
I wondered if you'd go for this one.
Yeah, one of those shows that we do where we just let our imaginations run wild. And I absolutely love doing those shows. And I know we've done a few of them now, and it's been a long time since we've done one. So I think we're due another one soon. But yeah, I absolutely enjoyed the concept of the Fantasy Pints one, where we sat and kind of chose the people that we'd most like to have a beer with, and just discussed our reasons why. And I think what it did for me as the co-host of this was it gave me a bit more of an insight into you and the sort of things that you're into. And I think possibly that would have come across to the listeners as well, in terms of understanding a bit more about both of us and the things that we're into outside of beer.
Yeah, because it was quite personal, wasn't it, by doing it like that, by having guests. It did mean you start to give a bit of an insight into those things you've possibly loved all of your life.
Yeah.
You know, and I spoke about your 50th, I'm 50 next year. So, you know, there's a few years between us of subject matter which we can pull from. So, yeah, it was really enjoyable. And I was actually thinking about that the other day. There is probably another fantasy episode due
I think so.
In the first two, before springtime. I think there's a winter's evening when we do this, Steve, where we do a bit another fantasy journey, where we can just lose ourselves away from everything.
100%. We'll commit to that right now. That will be happening. So what's your last showing in your top three of the year?
Okay, it's a very recent episode. It's Neptune.
I would have put money on you saying that then.
I've loved the beers from them before we even got to talk to them. I love the engagement with Julie, especially on Twitter, and to get them on the show. And to be honest, mate, look, we could have dropped a couple of the usual sections and just let them run with it. That's how good they were. And, yeah, we've mentioned the outtake, and I'm sure it'll get mentioned again in future episodes, but it was just such a good, fun recording. And again, we've never met them. We've never met these people. So it was literally one side of the screen. They were in their front room together. We were drinking their beers. They were introducing them. They were telling us stuff, but they were just so down to earth about everything as well, and just really matter of fact about the way life is. And, that Liverpudlian sense of humour was definitely coming out at times as well. Mm-hmm. Cracking episode, cracking beers, cracking brewery. Yeah, that's definitely in my top three.
Yeah, really enjoyed everything about that episode. Nothing more to add to that. My last one, probably in a similar sort of vein as well, was a couple of shows before that. And again, it was with a guest. And it was when we had Russ on from Amity Brew Co. Again, we've never met Russ, but he just came across so easy to talk to. He was so natural. It was a really easy conversation for us. It was great to hear about his background and also the building of the brand and the brewery. And it's also, now in hindsight, it's great to see that they're now fulfilling everything that he was speaking about. You've seen pictures on Twitter recently of the brew pub. It's there. The FVs are in. They just need to be able to open at the moment. That's the only thing that's stopping that from happening. But yeah, it was an absolute delight to sit down with Russ for the evening and to chat about, and again to drink the beers that he had sent us over to enjoy as part of that.
He was wonderfully engaging, and I'll be honest, I'm not sure everything he said would have been necessarily palatable to people when they heard it. He appeared to be at Brewdog for that particular period at a wonderful moment in time as well, when they were in between what they were and what they are. And he had nothing but good stuff to say about his time there. And it's really refreshing to hear as well. And, you know, he was very matter of fact about it's also a business.
Yeah.
You know, he didn't shy away from that. And again, a little bit like Julian Les, they didn't shy away from it. It's still a business. We only get beer to you if we make money. Simple as that. And you know, I found Russ's take on some of that really refreshing as well. And yes, he was very engaging. Again, we hadn't met him. He was obviously familiar with the show, so he knew how that worked, and he's very comfortable on the Zoom, which I'm guessing a lot of people are a lot more comfortable on Zoom at the end of 2020 than they were at the start of 2020. To be honest, so no, I think that's so. Between us, we come up with 6 different episodes there, Steve.
We have, and bearing in mind that we've put out 38 this year, that's not bad. And don't get me wrong, that's not saying that I've not enjoyed the other episodes. I enjoy doing this. I love what we do. I love talking about beer. I love having guests on and chatting with them about it as well. But sometimes, even as you're recording or as you get to the end of a recording,
you can feel it.
You know you've been part of something that's a little bit special.
Yeah, there is a feeling. I think I truly believe we always aim to put out good content, whether that be us or us plus others. But yeah, there are some when you come away from that thinking that was good, and then you think, I hope it comes across that way. Mm. It's both, isn't it? You and I have spoken about it sometimes, and we think, oh, that was really good, but I wonder how it's going to land. And then you get all that positive feedback and engagement afterwards, and you think, yeah, people heard what we heard.
Yeah, mate, we have the best listeners, and that's what they're so good at. They're great at telling us when they've enjoyed what we do, but they're also great at telling us when something hasn't landed quite so well. Yeah, because that allows us to act on that and to make changes as a result. So I can't. Our listeners are brilliant, and I'm gonna probably not going to be the last time I'm going to say this tonight, but thank you to every single person that listens to this and continues to get involved, because you know, seriously. I know I say this over and over again. It's a bit of a trope, but without our listeners, we're nothing. So we just want you folks to keep getting involved in what we do.
Definitely can't. I've got nothing to add to that, but I do have an empty glass.
So do I. As predicted, the beer didn't last very long at all.
Empty for like the last 5 minutes, if I'm being brutally honest. It just went, mate. I mean, it is pints are achievable. It's just it is a really good beer, and that's almost stinging bitterness that he's got going this time.
Still there, yeah.
It's that bitterness which, yeah, for some people unfamiliar with that level of bitterness, it will be a challenge. But for me, it's that bitterness which then, just as it starts to level off, you're ready to refresh again.
It's a fabulous beer, and I do think this second batch of it is even better than the first.
Yeah, and we both raved about the first version.
Yeah, it's an incredible beer, and it's a great beer to have opened this evening's proceedings on. But we should probably move on to our second. Obviously, what with it being the end of year extravaganza, we are not fucking around here, are we, with the beers tonight?
No, we're not.
We have jumped straight up from the 5.8% Oregon Trail to the 10% Camden Beer 2020, 500 mils of a barrel-aged Imperial Pilsner. Now, for our more eagle-eared listeners, you'll note that we've been drinking last year's version throughout this year to see how this beer changed.
Yeah, and that was listener engagement.
Yes,
very direct.
That was a
listener
suggestion.
Engagement.
Yeah, and I suppose this is now probably becoming another one of those Hopinions traditions. It says the year on it and the word beer, so it seems only right to drink this beer on the end of year show.
Yes, I think it could well be, provided they carry on doing it. I'm more than happy for us to do that. I suppose what I should add as a caveat is that normally we're recording in person and splitting said 500 milliliter 10% bottle.
Not tonight.
Oh dear.
It pours. I mean, it's a little bit darker than last year's one, isn't it?
It is a bit darker. And is it
hazy?
This is a real faint. Yeah. I suppose people would call it a hop haze. I don't know if you can say that quite about this one as a lager, but it's got a lovely foamy head on it as well.
It's beautiful, isn't it? It's a thick, bubbly, white, foamy head.
I mean, this one is.
That's.
Which barrel? What sort of barrels is this one on? Do you remember?
I believe it's white wine, and brandy barrels for 8 months. And I believe this has also had, sure, I remember reading somewhere that it's had grape juice or some sort of grape extract added to it.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, I suppose without further ado, then, Steve, shall we get in?
Cheers.
Here goes. Oh, that's bloody delicious.
Oh, God, that's really sharp.
That is sharp, but there's a real dryness at the end as well. It is there is definitely a dry white wine quality to that beer.
Now, you know a bit more about wine than I do, but yeah, my instant reaction to that is very wine-like.
Yes. And I think we found that when we were doing the beer 2019 throughout the last year or so, that the wine and the oak took over, became a lot more winey. Again, I think because we're drinking this pretty much as fresh as we can for the show, I'm still getting a beery quality, but laced with a dry white wine note. So if you're a dry white wine fan and you like a bit of lager, in theory, this should be almost like a perfect marriage. Doesn't drink like 10% though.
No. We're in trouble. We are in trouble here. It feels like a beer of two halves for me. So when you're initially drinking it, you're getting the fizz, the refreshing crispness that maybe you're looking for from a Pilsner. It's a little bit bready as well in there, and then as that begins to sort of wash over your palate, and you start to catch it at the back of your mouth, you do get that dryness come through, and there's a little bit of tartness in there as well.
I reckon that's the grape, because you said they added some grape extract
I'm
or something.
sure I read that somewhere.
And that can be quite, grapes can be quite tart sometimes. I think the game of two halves kind of thing that you said there is actually quite good. Yes, you definitely get that lager Pilsner hit to start off with. And then it sort of just changes as you get into it a bit more, and as you get the aroma going. Whereas Andy's beer, I think if you were doing that as a bit of a blind, you would pitch between 5 and 6%. This one, I think, because of the extra aroma and what's going on, you'd say, it's a fairly complex beer, but the ABV is well hidden.
I don't know where the ABV is in that. I can't pick that up at all.
So,
I'm guessing by the end of it, our listeners will be able to pick up the slurring.
They'll definitely be able to pick it up, and we'll definitely get some engagement off the back of that then.
Yeah. I don't think we want to let this one warm. I'm not advocating that we absolutely smash it right now, but
I agree. I think it's lovely chilled.
Yeah, I don't think we want to let it come up too much. So let's crack on with the next part of the show while we're enjoying this, which is kind of a bit of an overall look back at the last year, looking at some of the beery adventures and some of the things that have been kind of, I suppose, the biggish moments for us in the last year. So just a quick look back at 2020, if we go all the way back to January. It all started so well, didn't it? I got to the Colonel Tap Room, met you afterwards in the Royal Oak, and we drunk delicious pints of cask ale, and we were sat in there planning for this amazing trip that we had coming up to Czechia.
I know, and that was literally the back end of January, 30th of January, if memory serves me correct. You had decided that you couldn't just drink cask beer from Harvey's at the infamous Royal Oak. You thought, I'm in London, I'm going south of the river, I'm going to go to the Colonel Tap Room. Mate,
I never go south of the river, so while I was down there, I was going to take the full opportunity to go to the Colonel Tap Room and try it out.
By mid-March, I'd also done the Colonel Tap Room, and I think, just to give a shout out again, it's a lovely space. So that was still good. But yeah, that night, it was one of those evenings where there wasn't much room at the Royal Oak. It was quite busy. Josh was there with Alice, and if I remember correctly, was their dog with them as well?
Yeah, their dog was with them as well.
Yeah,
and I can't remember his name at the moment.
Yeah, we managed to find our spot table. I think we had a bit of food come out as well, and we did have a fair few pints a cask, while planning a trip that happened not more than 9 days later, mate.
I know, and you've obviously already mentioned that in terms of one of your show
12
highlights.
days later. Sorry, my maths was rubbish there.
Of the year. But yeah, what a trip that was to Czechia. First of all, we were exceptionally lucky for a number of reasons. One, because obviously that was all paid for by Budvar. We'll make no bones about that. We said so at the time. Full disclosure. The trip was on them. We had a fantastic time. It was educational. It was beautiful. Walking out into a snow globe on that second morning was just one of the moments that will live with me for the rest of my life, because it was just amazing,
mate. How Budvar managed to arrange for us we stayed in a UNESCO heritage site place similar to Bamberg. It has all these different coloured rooftops. It's very low rise, and fortunately, Josh, who's looking after us, suggested we should go for a walk to what is effectively the highest point in the city. And it was just wonderful. So, yeah, I mean, the first day was, it was a long day that first day, because obviously we met at the airport, we had the flight, we had the trip down to Budovica, had the time in the brewery and the chat with the guys. Then we went back to Český Krumlov, which is the UNESCO village, had some drinks and a table full of meat. Effectively, which we saw being cooked on an open fireplace, and we pretty much had the place to ourselves. Everywhere looked deserted. It was a Tuesday night, and then, like you say, the snow the next day, and then we got driven to places.
Yeah, we got to sample 2 or 3 microbreweries.
Yeah, I worked out roughly we sampled about 25. Sampled. When I say sampled, they weren't sample sizes.
No, it was a lot of beer that was drunk.
It's about 25 beers that day. And yeah, the bulk of it were the people that Budvar had taken us to were being very generous with both their time and their produce. And we literally, all we had to do was get in and out of a car.
Yep, smile, be polite. Say thank you and hello, and yeah.
we got to taste some fantastic beers, met some really good people, and then we had a bite to eat and some drinks in Prague, and then the next day, no snow, clear blue sky, in the middle of Prague, and then I think we killed an hour by having some foamy Pilsner Urquell pours. But even the place they chose for us to stay in Prague was a beer hotel. Yeah,
it was just everything about that trip was just bang on.
It will live forever in the memory. The company was fantastic. Was it Tim joined us from Brewers Journal? He was a lovely bloke, and we had a couple of cocktails with him on the evening after because we hadn't drunk enough beer.
Well, wasn't that in the early hours of your actual birthday, wasn't it? As well. So it was a celebration. There was a reason to be doing it. And then we got back, and in February we got to go to Brew London as well, which actually was certainly mine. I'm not sure about yours. It was my one and only beer festival that I went to this year.
Yep. We have to reference this for that very reason. So Brew London, for anyone who's not familiar, is the regular beer festival, just rebranded, held at the back end of February. The old Truman Brewery, which I think is actually a really good site for that kind of festival. We're lucky; we've been a few times. We know quite a few people there, so there was friends there as well. For whatever reason, I still thought it was a good idea to do the trade session in the afternoon, then take the ING Beer Club there in the evening. Stupid idea. So yeah, unbelievable that 27th of February was our first and last, Steve.
I know, because then, and we're not going to dwell on it. Things changed in March, didn't they? And as a result of that, actually everything became about Zoom. And I think possibly an online retailer may have sold out of green tablecloths as people discovered that they could play around with their backgrounds better if they had a green screen behind them. But certainly for us as a podcast, it made us look at the way that we do things. So it brought forward the release of the Budvar show, because that wasn't due to be coming out until April. It was supposed to be coming out at the same time as their Imperial hopped Pilsner. We took the decision to bring that forward. We had maybe seen some bits that were coming in March, and we'd actually recorded 2 shows back to back, so we were able to put one of those out.
That was quite a messy Monday though, because I think we top and tail the Budvar show. We essentially recorded 3 shows in one night. Yeah, that was a messy Monday.
Yeah, we took the decision to go weekly, which I'm going to say now, quite openly to you, thank you for that, because that helped me keep a little bit of sanity during a period of time when I wasn't working. And it gave me some focus every week. It gave me 2 points of focus every week, 1 point being the recording and 1 point being the editing. And I actually think during that time of us moving to recording online, it's possibly forever changed the way that we approach the show and deliver the show and produce the show, because it made us think about a lot of the ways that we do things.
Yeah, I agree. And I think especially when we went to weekly, we were very conscious that if we're going to put out weekly content, we can't have 2 hours of us rambling literally every week. And I think for a little period of time, a little bit of a secret, but we did a little bit of timing every now and again with the watch and keeping a very close eye on the clock, just to make it a little bit tighter for those weekly shows. It was a pleasure doing the weekly show, Steve. I would say there was 3 focus points. Your constant WhatsApp messages of planning, starting off with the immortal words, "I've had an idea," and me going, "Oh no."
You love it when I have ideas, mate.
So the emoji of hands over eyes or hands over ears was used quite frequently then. But yeah, it was good for me as well, because although I started working from home and work got really busy, obviously I wasn't going out. 2 of my main reasons for going out is the pub and the gym if I'm not going to work, and neither of those were available to me. So to be able to then transition to online, and I think again we started off by using Skype, if I remember correctly.
First couple, yeah.
And that was definitely harder work than what we've got now with Zoom. I really enjoyed the transition process and us learning a little bit more about how this can work. I mean, I feel just as connected to you right now, Steve, through this. And I know that a number of the podcasts that I listen to outside of the beer world have done nothing but use tech. And yes, most of them started off by using Skype. I imagine they've transitioned to starting to use Zoom as well, because I think the quality is much better than Skype. I think Skype's on its way out with the advent of Microsoft Teams anyway. So yeah, I see no reason why we don't continue this. The world, as you have said before, Steve, is a smaller place because of the tech.
I totally agree, and we've been able to use the tech to our advantage as well, and we ended up doing the summer sesh. We've recently just this past weekend gone back and done the Crimbo Crawl. There were a couple of other kind of online events that we've done, and yes, they've all ended up a little bit messy, but we've been able to connect with a lot of our listeners by doing those events as well. And actually, the Crimbo Crawl this past weekend was probably the smoothest event we've ever run in terms of people chatting and getting involved. And I think that, again, is a consequence of everyone's got used to this now.
Yeah. Well, the phrase of 2020, "you're on mute," hardly came up at all on Saturday night.
I so need that on a T-shirt. I really do.
Yeah, you need on the front, "you're on mute," and on the back, "sorry, I was on mute." Yeah, we did 4 or 5 online sessions in slightly different formats. I think we did a bit of a burst in the summer. They were all great fun. And again, we met some people, Steve, who were only previously icons on Twitter and a Twitter handle. they're now real people. I know that you've got involved in a few other things when you've had a bit more free time as well with some people. I feel like, and if we're talking about Zoom, bottle share.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. We
Come on,
took,
mate, bottle
took
share.
bottle share online, didn't we? Yeah.
Straight away, my last bottle share was February. There was one in March, which I couldn't go to because work had started to ramp up because people started to get an inkling we were going to be sent home any day. And then the first one in April, 7th of April, we had the first virtual bottle share, and it's carried on going. And I would argue that we probably know each other a bit better.
I think so, yeah.
And we're all able to connect at the same time because bottle share tends to have, say, 10 to 12 people roughly on a usual first Tuesday of the month. But we can't all talk to each other at the same time because at one end of the table to the other end. So you get like groups of 3 and 4. Whereas there's 10 of us. There's generally a good group of 10 of us who have decided at this day quite happy to do the virtual version. And we're able to talk to each other and all at the same time, as in one person talking, 9 people listening. So everyone's hearing the same stuff at the same time rather than only hearing bits of conversations. I think it's been brilliant. I'm so pleased that we've been able to keep that going as well. So pleased. And yeah, tech has definitely proved its worth with that because there's a couple of people on the bottle share who live alone as well.
Yes, it's been a bit of a lifeline, and certainly it was for me in the early days as well because I wasn't able to see Emma for a few months, and kind of looking forward to that first Tuesday of the month and knowing I was going to be able to get together with everyone and have a chat and have a laugh and just have that interaction with people was a real kind of marker in the sand in terms of something to look forward to.
Yeah, and was literally a marker in the sand because our days have started to merge. So that first Tuesday of the month actually was a literal marker in the stand. I thought it was really, really good that we were able to do that.
It's great that kind of virtual bottle share is still continuing because it still has to at the moment. It's as simple as that. So come July, we were able to go to the pub again. I was adamant on weekly recordings with you that I wasn't going anywhere near a pub until September. And then I ended up in one the day after opening.
Steve's willpower lasted 24 hours.
It was we had taken a walk into town. We were thirsty. It was a hot day. There was no one in there. We were able to book. We went in. We had a couple of pints. It was a great experience to be back in the pub. But I didn't really feel like I'd gone back to the pub until I went back to the Vic in Colchester and had first pints in the Vic, and with a renewed vigour. I'd seen that the Vic had sort of taken to putting in a permanent Colonel line as well, which was great news. And I think Emma and I became regular visitors almost every other week to the Vic during the short time that it was allowed to be opened again.
I think that was August, wasn't it? Because I think the Vic took a few weeks to transition,
they came back in August, and then certainly August through to November, we were trying to do our best to have regular visits there, just because enjoy the beers there. We enjoy being there, and it's a great way to enjoy a couple of hours of your afternoon as well.
Yeah, I mean, I particularly took the opportunity to go to a few places that I had discovered while I'd been out cycling. And yes, listeners, we haven't forgotten about Hopinions on Wheels. It hasn't gone away. It's just that in winter, there's a lot less to say about it.
It's not something you want to do in the winter. It's really not.
Well, certainly not you and I. But yeah, I remember going through the summer and there was a few places which I'd marked out that I wanted to pay a visit to. So I think I went out for my longest bike ride in terms of time, but probably my lowest amount of kilometres, stopping at a few places, sitting outside. And again, we were blessed with a lovely late spring and early summer as well, where we could sit outside and take stock and really enjoy our surroundings. And that was lovely. It was wonderful to have those moments. And, September, I was able to take Michael back to university in Plymouth and have a couple of days down there and visit a few places as well. And in September, I think I even managed to sneak in a visit to the Victoria solely. I told you it was to see you and Emma, but it was solely to drink Colonel beer, obviously.
Clearly.
And Colin from Beer O'Clock Brewing, who lives in Colchester, joined us as well. So that's a really fun evening. But again, that was my first visit to the Vic. And I don't live in Colchester, but I would have got there more than once since we'd done an episode in February where I drank low alcohol beer because I was driving.
Which was the day before we went to Czechia. That's why you were on low alcohol beer.
Yes. Probably a good thing, actually. That's very sensible.
I also got to go in September. I got to go to Leeds for the weekend. Emma took me for my birthday, and I made the most of that. I'm not going to go into that now. We've covered that on previous shows if you want to listen back to it. But it was great to go back to Leeds and to drink fantastic beer in a city that I've a particular fondness for, as well. And then, obviously, come November and bringing us full circle to where we are now, we find ourselves not being able to visit the pubs again as and when we please. But we're doing our best to support local independent suppliers wherever we can, aren't we?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And, one of those things I had managed to do is that the Leon C Tap Room had really expanded their operation. And I was able to get there September, October, November. And had a lovely time, and I do like their beers anyway, and that'll become a bit more when we talk about beers. There's just one other beery adventure I do need to give a shout out, and I have referenced it briefly earlier, and that was my visit to Leicester to be part of the East versus West Midlands podcast off between Beers Without Frontiers and Men Behaving Badly, and that was the Saturday before we went to Czechia. So yeah,
you don't do things by halves, do you, mate?
No, evidently not. But I'd never been to Leicester. I went to 2 or 3 new places, had a really nice time. Always good to spend time with the guys from Men Behaving Badly and Beers Without Frontiers. I think we haven't mentioned everything, but I think we did 3 or 4 things together as well by the end of February.
We were fast out of the blocks this year.
We were very fast because we did the pub call with Sean. We did the podcast recording with Chris Hall like 48 hours later.
Yeah.
So by the 6th of January, we'd already effectively done 2 pub calls.
That's not bad going, is it?
It's not bad going for January.
No, not bad going at all.
And looking back, I'm so pleased we did those things as well. You just never know what's around the corner. So when you get an opportunity to do something, if there's nothing that 2020 hasn't taught us, it's definitely just take the bull by the horns. If you get the chance to do something, don't always park it, because that opportunity may not come back round again.
Wise words, mate. Wise words.
They happen sometimes. I want that. I want someone to laminate that.
In terms of looking back at the year as a whole, there's just a couple of other, I suppose, a couple of other things that I want to mention in terms of what I think 2020 has been in terms of the year in beer. So first one, I mean, neither of these are going to come as any surprise to anyone. So the first one is the hashtag Bipper comeback, where it's always kind of been there and it's been a bit of a joke. And I know Andy Parker's a keen driver of that, but it took nearly all of the year. But it finally happened,
didn't it?
About 2 months ago, where we got not only the return of Thornbridge's Wild Raven, which was probably the first black IPA that I ever drank back in 2012, but the amazing Magic 8 Ball returned from Magic Rock. I don't know if they finally got fed up with me trolling them on Twitter or if they had always planned to do it, but on drinking both of those, I was instantly transported back to the beginning of my craft beer journey. I was instantly taken back to 2012, and I was drinking flavors that it felt like I was experiencing them for the first time again. Probably more so in Magic 8 Ball, because that was just a tremendous beer. And, people are entitled to have their own opinions about Magic Rock these days. But you know what? They brew great beer, and Magic 8 Ball was a real example of that.
Well, I'm pretty certain that neither of those beers that I'd had previously, and the Wild Raven you kindly give me a can, they are both excellent examples of the style. I think my first exposure to Bipper was probably Beavertown.
Oh yeah, Black Betty.
Yeah, which that came out in the last third of this year as well, didn't it?
Yeah, that came back again. Yeah,
and that was probably my first example of it. But the Wild Raven and the Magic 8 Ball just superbly drinkable, and just find that right point between your chocolate, your dark aroma and flavors, and your fruity notes from the hops and stuff. it would be so hard to choose between either of those two beers. So hard to choose between either of those two beers. But yeah, if we're talking about style, Steve, I ended up with a final list of 18 beers for me to think what my beer of the year. Kind of thing. I've got 14 styles on that list.
That's good going, mate.
And again, I'm saying that as per how Untapped give the style. So we're not necessarily saying BJCP, which I think is the right one, but I think that's pretty good going. There's a real mix, and we'll go into that in a bit more detail, but I think we've probably ordered maybe some different styles as well, because, if we're talking about maybe trends and stuff like that, we've been at home a lot more. And so you've maybe picked out beers from different places who are doing different styles. Some of the breweries we found, some of the stuff they do. So yeah, I would say that actually my exposure to different styles has probably increased this year.
I'd agree to that. So to a certain extent, I'm probably still reverting to type quite a lot. And one of the other comments I wanted to make about this year was I think it very much has been the year of the return of the proper West Coast IPA. I think we started to see some breweries dabbling with it last year. But what we were still getting was a lot of juicy, sweet beers that were calling themselves West Coast, and in my memory, were nothing like West Coast.
No.
And then April came around, and Thornbridge dropped an announcement that probably broke the internet for an hour or so, that they had done a collab with Firestone Walker, Pondera, which was a West Coast IPA. I know you and I bought a lot of Pondera, and
all the ones.
We drank a lot of that beer, and yes, it was incredible to drink a beer that was crisp and clean and had those big citrus grapefruit notes. And I was like, yes, this is it. This West Coasts are back. And then we drank Big Eagle from Brew York, and I was like, fuck yes. West Coast IPAs are back.
Yeah, I mean, to be clear, Big Eagle 2020.
Yes, but sorry, I got too excited there. What that bought that Pondera didn't have was the malt profile, which I had forgotten was a thing in West Coast IPAs. The backbone to the West Coast IPA that we first found in like maybe 2011, 2012 was, Pondera. I think you used a really critical word there, the word clean. Those US IPAs are definitely clean. Yeah.
They definitely lean towards that. I don't know whether it's the water profile or something, but there's definitely a cleanness about it, a crispness. Whereas I think the ones which we find, the American IPAs we find done by UK brewers, especially over the last, say, this year, you get that malt backbone to it, but still in the balance.
Yeah.
There's still there's a bitter finish, there's a dryness, there's piney notes, but all the way behind it is something it's all pinned to, and that's that malty backbone.
Yeah. And I want to see more of that. I really do. I think that's the style of beer that I fell in love with. And that's the style of beer that I'd forgotten about. I think the closest you could get to that for a long time was Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. Torpedo occasionally when you could get it. But now we're seeing more breweries, and certainly when I'm seeing the words West Coast now, I'm trusting them a little bit more. Whereas maybe 12 months ago, I was still a little bit like, I think you've just put those words on there, and what you've given me is a juicy, sweet beer inside.
I even took to checking, when you check sometimes on Untapped, I would start checking people's pictures of the beer.
Yeah, I've done that. I will openly admit I've done that, because if I look at it and it's cloudy or hazy, I'm like, well, that's not West Coast.
No, that is in no shape or form is it West Coast by any stretch of anyone's imagination. So stop saying it. Just say it's IPA or New England.
Yeah. So anything else from the year, mate, that you want to mention just before we wrap up our review?
I would just say some of the shifting trends that some of us found through our working life being transformed through the beer industry that we love. Zoom launches, Utopian.
Oh, that's massive, isn't it? Yeah.
So, I'm sure that Utopian will get a bit of a shout out at some point, but I'm going to give them my shout out now because I think they've taken the work that people like Braybrook, Don Zoco, and Keller Pills,
Lost and Grounded.
yeah, have done to another level because they're just focusing on lager. They're 440 cans. The branding's fantastic. And then they started doing their online launches. Now, they're based in the middle of nowhere in Devon. Unless they're going to go to some really central places, say London, Manchester, Sheffield, maybe Glasgow, Edinburgh, people ain't getting to those launches. And they did 3 online Zoom launches, and each one got just a bit better. And we were able to listen directly to the guy who'd brewed it. We were able to listen directly to the person who is behind Utopian. And listen to their rationale for setting up the brewery, why they ended up in Devon, why they're doing these particular different styles that we were lucky enough to try. And massive shout out to Utopian for the beers they have sent us and the glassware that they sent us during the period we've been through. Thank you ever so much. Loved all the beers, and there's been some crackers in there, especially a couple of ones like the Cerne Speciale and the Rainbock, to name 2. That's definitely been a shift. That's been such good fun as well, because again, we were limited on what else we could do. So to be able to spend an hour with a group of people who were all loving the same thing and listening to how it was made, but not having to plan a whole day to do it.
Yeah.
Made it accessible. And we talk about accessibility in a lot of times with regard to the beer world. And the tech has made a lot of things more accessible. So I thought that was definitely a trend, and that isn't going. That genie's out of the bottle.
I think we'll see that continuing. Absolutely, yeah.
That will, because yes,
but for the better.
Yes, an in-person beer launch is great, and I'm lucky that I often work in London, and a lot of those beer launches take place in the city I'm working in, so I don't have to pay to get there. But even though you're only 45 minutes away from London, Steve, you still have to pay to get there, so there's a cost.
Yeah.
I would say that some of the other things that I've noticed is I've discovered a few more of my local bottle shops who have transitioned or stepped up their online presence. It's probably a better way of putting it. And also buying beers direct from breweries. Wasn't something I did too much. And then Colonel launched their own online brewery. And I went, fuck it, I don't want 12 beers from them. I want a case of 24. And then did it again.
I think in 2020, if you're a brewery and you haven't got an online shop, you're out of the game. It's as simple as that. So many transitioned really quickly into that online space, and that was great to see. Impressively quickly,
because there's a whole load of logistics that come with that. It's not just setting up a website; you've then got to deliver on that.
It's been a great year for breweries getting their product to the customer, which isn't through their normal method, i.e. pubs.
Yeah.
Everybody's transitioned really well into small pack and getting various, whether it's cans, bottles, beer in a bag, beer in a box, however they've done it.
Well, the mini cask.
Yeah. It's been absolutely great to see that. And we've seen some absolutely fantastic beers as a result of that, which I know we're going to come on to talk about in a while.
I think some of these things are good. And I know that we've referenced already, talking to Jules at Hop Hideout, that brewery is obviously selling direct, but there is still a place for me for the bottle shop, whether that me be in person or online, because I don't take the Colonel out of the equation. I don't always want to order a case of one beer from a brewery.
You want to mix it up sometimes, don't you?
Yeah. And let's be honest. Let's both reference Beer Central here.
Yeah.
Michelle does the Beer Central order because it means that she can go, I'll have one can of that. I'll have one bottle of that. And maybe over a period of 6 weeks, you have a full box ready to pay for and be delivered. And you can have a mixture of breweries, a mixture of styles. You can have a wide variety. You haven't had to go for the whole one size fits all from a brewery. So there is still a place for those places. But again, you need that online presence and you need to do it well. Get your produce pictures, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, whatever social media you want to put it on, just make sure people know about it and then deliver. Literally, when I say deliver, again, I'll reference Sean, bomb-proof boxes. You go in the box, then there's some more wrapping, then there's a bit of bubble wrap, then there's some cardboard, and I'm thinking there must be beer in here somewhere. But it's so tightly packed, and credit where credit's due to Sean, barely a dent in a can.
Yeah, his packaging is amazing, and I think ultimately, at the end of the day, he's going to lose money if any of that is damaged in transit. Yeah. So he's got to put that effort in at his end to make sure it gets to us in one piece.
But there are some breweries who could learn from Sean because they think cans are indestructible.
Yeah, they're not.
They're fucking not.
Yeah,
especially these days because they're actually quite thin. They actually don't need so much. And if you're just going to have them rattling around loose, and it's going to go in transit and be handled by multiple people, which you're not in control of, then yes, something's going to go wrong. Learn from Sean. Be more Sean. That's what I say.
Well, I don't know about you, mate, but I've finished my beer 2020.
I've got a little bit left, but that's only because I've been dragging it out.
The one thing that I will comment that kind of happened more as I was drinking it was I said earlier on about not really noticing the ABV. What I was noticing was after each sip, as it began to just slightly warm, I mean, I managed to still drink it all fairly chilled, was that I was getting a little bit more heat, a little bit more burn coming down the nose after a sip. And that's something that I very much relate to when I'm drinking wine. You do get a lot of the vapor and the aroma goes sort of up and then comes back down again.
Yeah.
I did pick up. That's where I was getting the booze. It was coming down my nose.
I hadn't really thought about it because I mean, when you do drink wine, you're definitely very much a red wine drinker, aren't you?
I am. I don't enjoy white wine. I don't like it. I do drink pretty much exclusively red.
So I just wonder whether you noticed some of those notes a bit more because I didn't get that. What I did know is that it was definitely as it warmed up a little bit more, it was getting a lot more mellow. There was a lot more balance to some of those notes that we'd mentioned 20 minutes ago. So I have to admit, I think we've said, although we may not do a whole year's worth of experimenting, I think we're going to try and maybe get one or two more. Yeah. I think that white wine quality would increase.
Come through more. Yeah. I agree.
I'd be massively surprised. After our experience last year, I'd be massively surprised. But again, it's 10% barrel-aged Imperial Pilsner. Who thought that was a thing?
Exactly. And again, we will say, again, people will have their thoughts about Camden and their ownership, but I think it's great that they still put out this sort of beer once a year, because it shows what their brewers can do. It allows their brewers to show their skill, which I love, and I really enjoy drinking. I really enjoyed drinking that, and I am looking forward to, if we do it again in the future, to trying it again and seeing how it moves on. That being said, let's move on now to what actually is a Hopinions Beer O'Clock Show tradition, as we move into enjoying last year's Fuller's Vintage Ale. Previously, I didn't really enjoy this one. I'm going to say, when I tried it last year, because I always try, as listeners will probably know, we always get a few bottles of this. I always do one relatively fresh, then we do one on the show a year after, and then a couple are tucked away in the cellar for undefined points in the future. And when I first tried the 2019 last year, I didn't enjoy it at all. I didn't get on with it. I thought it was all over the place. I thought it was unbalanced. I've tried it a couple of times since at kind of almost periodic times throughout the year, and it has been getting gradually better. And I've got to say, as I'm pouring that, the aroma that's coming off of that is really inviting.
I think this has been one of the slowest burners over the years. I think 2018 and 2017 were fantastic. I've tried it twice before. Similar to you, had it quite early on when it comes out. And then I think when we had it as part of Opinions 100, we had the 2018 shortly after it, which just blew the 2019 out of the water, to be fair to it. So I'm actually really excited about getting into this again, given that it's almost a year since I had it.
Let's procrastinate no longer, my friend. Cheers.
Cheers. Now that has started to develop. I know we have vintage ales from Fuller's always use different hops. This feels like it's now a Fuller's vintage ale.
Yeah. There's a lot going on in there, isn't there?
And, bearing in mind, we've actually taken a step down. I mean, the beat only a 1.5% from 10% to 8.5%. Because, hey, kids, responsible drinking, it's definitely got that sort of fruitcake quality going on.
Yeah, but it's boozy fruitcake.
Yes, I was just going to say that.
Well, isn't it?
This is the first beer tonight that I'm feeling a bit of a boozy hit to it.
Yeah.
It's not hiding. It's an 8.5% beer.
There's a warmth to it, isn't there? It finishes with a real warmth coming down, and it's a
very pleasing warmth.
It's coming good.
Yeah, it was a slow burn, and probably I'm sure that you've still got at least one more tucked away. I'm sure I have as well. It's definitely a beer which is the last. I mean, I suppose it's been a year. It's probably about a year and a half old now. It's good.
Yeah. In parallel to that, though, I'm not sure if you've tried a 2020 yet. I have, and the 2020 is cracking straight out of the box.
Yeah, I saw your post about that.
This time it is so good, but it's interesting to see whether that again is a result of the hops doing their work initially. What will happen in future years as the hops begin to die off and actually the malt and the yeast begin to go to work?
Well, we spoke about that with some of the older styles that we did in Opinions 100. There were a couple of ones where we didn't exactly love them.
No,
we felt that things that either turned and wouldn't come back, or maybe there was still another stage to come. But some of those ones, I think maybe 14 and 13, we were going, there's a bit more cellar and mustiness going on here rather than flavour and lots of things. Whereas we've both had older ones. Early 2000s, one of my favourite ones is still 2006. I still think that's a cracker. And we both had the 2000 at my son's birthday.
Yeah.
And that was fantastic that day. So, yeah, you never know quite where it's going to pitch. But this 15 months down the line from my first tasting, is stepped up.
It very much so. Very much so. This is definitely coming of age. This one now, and this is, but still early age. I think this will continue to get better.
Yeah. Should we make some sort of effort to try and sip it a little bit, Steve, while we get into the next bit?
We probably should, because we're going to go through this week's question.
Opinions, 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 opinions.
This was us asking our listeners what their beer of the year is, what their brewery of the year is, and what their other highlights of the year is. So this is kind of where we give our what we call our listener choice awards, plus we look at some of our listeners' highlights. Obviously it wasn't a vote, so there's no statistics on the vote, but we did have over 650 interactions on this tweet, which is great to get that level of interaction on a single tweet. And thank you to everybody that got involved. There is a link in the show notes. You can click on the question, you can go through and you can read all the responses. So first up, we are going to go with the Listener's Choice Award for their beers of the year. We had over 50 suggestions for beers of the year this year. In second place was Burning Skies Indecision Time 692 Sabro. Now, are we being trolled here?
Yes, because that there would be no indecision on my part.
No, none whatsoever. But it's what the listeners choose. So
yeah, and let's face it, Burning Sky are never going to be that low down in any sort of listener choice award, are they?
They're incapable of not producing a great beer, aren't they?
I mean, I think we got asked on the Crimbo Crawl on Saturday. It might have been Sophie down in Bristol about the Colonel Sabro. Given our love for Colonel, yeah, we still didn't order it.
No, and I still wouldn't. I still wouldn't.
And I've got no doubt that Colonel have showcased Sabro brilliantly.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to have it.
No, I'm not. I'm not. This one has a joint first place, so couldn't separate these two. Equal number of votes. Elusive Brewing's Oregon Trail, which we've already drunk this evening.
Steve,
And
I thought you didn't vote on your own polls.
I didn't. I don't vote on my own poll.
Are you sure?
I'm absolutely positive. And also one that I've got to say, I love it when this happens. I haven't heard of this beer. Tempest's barrel aged, all the leaves are brown. Which
Bypass me as well.
from what I understand is a barrel aged brown ale.
Oh, so Andrew from Rhythm Brews voted multiple times.
And probably bought all of it. So they're our joint winners in the listeners' beers of the years. Beers of the years.
Beers of the years.
Yeah, it's beer number 3 on the end of year extravaganza. This is going to start happening now, folks.
So listener choice award for brewery of the year, and again, well over 40 plus suggestions for this. And in typical fashion, we're in reverse order. Third place, Thornbridge.
That doesn't surprise me.
It doesn't surprise me because we referenced Pondera earlier, and they've started doing their subscription box. They definitely picked up the online world as quickly as they could do. And again, second place, Burning Sky. They can't.
Not surprised.
They can't do much wrong.
I really don't buy enough Burning Sky beer, and I really should rectify that in the coming year.
Have we done Burning Sky on the show, Steve?
Never.
Right, 2021.
Yeah.
We find the right Burning Sky beer. Maybe if listeners want to nominate one, but we can do. And no, not the one that came in second place earlier, the 692 Sabro, because it's not happening. But one of their other beers, then maybe let's give it a good shout out.
I've drunk plenty of their beer this year.
Yeah.
And one of their beers was an early contender for me in terms of beer of the year. So I'm surprised that we haven't ever featured them on the show.
I know it is a surprise to me, but it's a much loved brewery and they have much loved beers. So we 2021, it's on the list.
We'll make that commitment right here, right now to our listeners. We will feature Burning Sky beers next year.
But first place, and this is where they have done so well in 2020, Utopian. Massive shout out to the guys at Utopian. We've already referenced them. We've already referenced some of their beers. We've already referenced their transition to doing the online beer launches, which I thought they pitched really well. What do you think about that top 3 then, Steve?
I'm a little surprised. I'm going to say I'm not surprised to see Thornbridge in there. I'm surprised to see Burning Sky in there, but I know there's a lot of love out there for them. What really surprises me is as you've already mentioned, the impact that Utopian have had on the beer world, the beer community, in particular beer Twitter. I think there was a point early on in sort of March, April, May, where you literally couldn't go on to beer Twitter without somebody talking about Utopian Brewery. And I think that speaks volumes in terms of them doing something really, really right.
Yeah, it wasn't just their engagement. It wasn't just the beers stand up to the engagement.
Yeah.
So yeah, you may be curious the first time, and we got to try a few of them when we were speaking to Ruth Beer Fairy at Brew London. We sampled a few, and then like I said, we were lucky enough to be involved in the online beer launches. They sent us the beer, but I'm pretty certain between us we've had 5 or 6 orders.
Easily,
over the course of time as well. And that's probably over just the last 8 months. We're not alone. I've seen plenty of people ordering
lots of people
the Utopian beers. They're very reasonably priced. They are very good beers. The branding is excellent. They have pinned their colours to the mast. They've gone, we're a lager brewery. That's all we're doing. We'll give you as many different lagers as you think we can do, and maybe a few you never thought about. And they've nailed it. They have definitely. I mean, it would never have been their plan to do all of this year the way they've done it.
You talk about the branding. If we were doing an award for branding of the year, without a doubt, my vote would go not just Utopian, but the branding on that CERN Specialny, that black and gold, is possibly the most beautiful thing I've seen on a can all year.
It's exquisite. Really is exquisite. And there's been some fantastic cans this year. More so than bottles, but I think that's because I've just seen more cans. but it was very much utopian branding done just a little bit different because they brought out slightly different beer. And it looks fantastic on the shelf, whether that be your beer cupboard, your beer cellar, or your fridge shelf. It looks cracking. It stands out, but it still says utopian.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, we don't often talk about branding, but I think we've both been impressed with the utopian branding this year.
They've launched very well, and they've stood out in the market as well.
Which I think they had to, because Burning Sky have been around a while. They've built their reputation.
You know, their branding's incredible as well, isn't it?
Yeah, but they've built their reputation. That we're familiar with their branding. This time last year, we're not talking about utopian.
No.
So they've done a fantastic job of getting the beers and the brand awareness out in 2020 in a very difficult market when everyone else is trying to showcase their wares because people are having to buy in a different way. So yeah, I've been massively impressed, and I think they deserved their first place, but I was surprised they got first place.
I am, but I'm not.
Is that because of the engagement? Do you think that it's fresh in the memory, fresh in the mind?
Yeah, I think so, and especially with them launching the Cern Specialty in the last few weeks, that landed. You and I were blown away by it.
Yep.
And then a lot of people ordered it, and a lot of people have been blown away by it. So it's you know, credit where credit's due. They've done very well there.
Yeah. Thanks to everyone though who's interacted, because I know it takes a little bit more effort than just having a vote on a poll.
Yeah, you have to actually think about this one to put in your responses, don't you? So
yeah, thank you everyone for that. But we've got some highlights coming up, Steve.
We have. We'll just rattle through these. So first up from Richard Taylor at Richard Taylor 1608, doing Fuller's Vintage Vertical Tasting with Martin and Steve. We've already referenced that. We absolutely love that. Thanks, Rich, for hosting us, and thanks for comparing and being involved. We really do appreciate that. Next up, bit of a personal one for me. This Twinny from Emma W. Twinny. That's Emma. A beery highlight, taking Steve to Leeds so he could show me his faves. It was a great weekend. I mentioned it early on. We've mentioned it on a previous show. I love Leeds. I love the place. I love the people. I can't wait to go back again.
Spiritual home for you, Steve. Spiritual home, mate. Some more comments. One from James at Gammon Baron. Nomadic Beers Virtual Tap Room. I love Katie and Mike. From Dr. Gaffer Katie of Nomadic Beers, Leeds Brewster. Caps off and Elusive come into our tap room for events in the middle of a pandemic, putting their faith in us to provide a safe environment and give something different to our customers.
From Russ Clark at Gentleman of Beer, the big obvious one launching Amity, and despite all the Rona nonsense, getting the brew pub live. Congrats on that, Russ. Well done. And then from Richard Lindsay at Richard_Lindsay, the launch of New Barnes Brewery, a fantastic brewery with amazing people.
Yeah, on New Barnes, I think 2021, I think they're going to be quite high up on a lot of people's lists.
They're going to be huge next year.
That would be my tip for 2021 is New Barnes. From John at Beer in the Suburb, next day delivery, especially when those cans arrive fridge cold. And I've sent a WhatsApp to you every now and again, haven't I, saying the beers have turned, whatever beers it is, delivery's turned up at 10 o'clock in the morning and they're just almost like perfect drinking temperature. And then I have to go back to my work call. Damn. From JT at Ale and Metal. As contentious as it is, Tesco versus Morrison supermarket battle for many, many people is allowing them access to beers they could only previously get by ordering online with a minimum spend and delivery fee. I can now get a big variety of beers while getting groceries.
Oh, spoiler alert on that one. People might want to listen to Beer Nation to hear you expand on that. That's all I'm going to say on that. From Paulie G at Can I Get a P? In terms of beer highlights, the Brew Gooder collabs for charity never seem to pick up column inches despite producing some very good beers. The Michael Jackson Foundation to get more black people into brewing and distilling was launched to much fanfare and should be applauded. From Paul Wright at lean_left_right, doing the Sturchley Beer Mile twice, although Glasshouse Beers was closed both times. We'll make it there soon.
From Johnny Beerboy at Johnny Beerboy, first and then last pints of cask in the Colmore tap between lockdowns, and the support for my local craft bar. And from Beyond the Pale at Ian Sutton 12, Manchester Beer Festival, the best large fest bar none. thank God I managed to get it in this year.
From Sean O'Reilly at Uncrulia, highlights have been the Utopian Inn and Sunday Club for the regular contact with friends. I've got to say, there are also lots and lots of other comments for virtual drinks, meetups, tasting events and pubs. There was lots of those that came through. We can't list them all. But as I said earlier, if you click through on the link in the show notes, you'll be able to see the comments. And then from Beers Without Frontiers podcast, that beers_frontiers, summer sesh on Zoom, Beer School with Nat, recording Beer Nation 2020, and the only beer festival of the year, Indie Beer Feast.
And last in this section, from Michael at Mick McGrorty, beery highlight of the year is undoubtedly Nat's virtual beer school. It was great fun. I learned loads and it helped me get my first beer-related qualification. Big shout out to yourselves as well for a consistently stellar podcast all year long.
Well, thank you very much, Michael.
Yeah, thank you very much. And Nat's Beer School has got quite a lot of love.
Hasn't it just? So, yes, again, we've got a Listener Choice Award in the Beery Highlights. Nat's Beer School gets the Listener Choice Award, but it's a joint award with, and there were lots of comments for this as well, Hop Hideout's Indie Beer Feast as well, which I think was one of the only beer festivals to slip through earlier on in the year. But it's great to get all those comments, all of those great highlights from people, whether it be beers, breweries, or things that you've done. Keep those coming. Use the hashtag opinions, and you may very well find yourself in this next part of the show.
Let us know, write it down. Let us know, write it down. Let us know your thoughts and bitter and lingerness. Write it down.
From Mike Maguire at Maguire Mike, the Maguires love Neptune Brewery. Listening to Julie and Les talk about the brewery, the local area and the beers with the humour and twang that I love and miss made this an outstanding and emotional podcast. Thank you all. That outtake, though, class. People really love those outtakes, don't they? From the last show. They really do. From Wayne at Irish Beer Snob, continuing my catch up of the back catalogue. Love the episode featuring Rob Edwards and love the closing tune. Agree with Martin and rants regarding opening times. Same applies to restaurants too. Also, fondly remember our Cannonball run in Owls by Mao in Billericay too.
Oh, that was a while ago. It's about 4 years ago, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Blimey, lifetime. From Jake Williams at Bagan 71. I haven't been in a pub or bar since November the 3rd, but like the Force, pub going will always be with me, and I can't wait to return. Oh, and our government is definitely the worst, but the USA might just trump us. I believe that might be a reference to our conversation with Owen Walsh on the Brussels Beer City one.
Yeah.
But yes, thank you very much for that one. Your boy, Rob Edwards, Rob_Edwards 90, for those one or two people who may not know who Rob is. There has been no need to put the heating on in my house this morning. Instead, I have been wrapped up in this audio blanket. If Martin and Steve are a cup of hot chocolate, then Owen is the whipped cream and sprinkles on top. Excellent show as always, chaps.
I don't think you're going to beat a description of this podcast this year than that's any better, are you? From Paulie G at Can I Get a P? Another great episode. Clearly need to get that Brussels Brew Project Scotch Ale. I somehow forgot the brewery Owen was talking about being in a small Wallonian village. And then from Ian A, hey at Hey. Good show, even if it did remind me of the work trip to Belgium that should have happened, but didn't. Really enjoyed it.
And finally, from Rasco and Disco Beer Review, hashtag stay safe. Gents, massive thank you. Great show. I feel the same way about pubs. I learned a fair bit about Belgian beer too.
Great comments, as always. Just keep the comments coming. Use the hashtag Hopinions. We're at the part of the show that everybody has been waiting for. And no, it's not the wheels, not the wheels falling off completely. Apparently it is the wheels falling off. It's not. The wheels are falling off. They're off. They're loosened. We're at the part of the show where everybody wants to know what our beers and brewery of the year is. Tell me your two honourable mentions for brewery of the year.
Okay, honourable mention 1 and 2, Cheshire Brew House and Leon C. So Cheshire Brew House, we were lucky enough to have some beers from them a couple of years ago, and I was so blown away by those beers that I ordered a case of beer on the train home after recording. And pretty much this year I did the same. I've ordered a couple of cases from Cheshire Brew House. and they were one of the first breweries that I could honestly say they have done their bit to transition to cans and make those beers taste and feel like I'm drinking cask beer. But having said all of that, the two beers that they produced this year, Govinda and Gibraltar Porter,
Amazing.
fucking amazing. Both of them were amazing beers.
And cracking artwork as well. Let's give the artwork a mention there.
That work on the cans has definitely stepped up a notch as well from the labelling on the old bottles, which was still good. This is another notch up. And also, we've seen a bit more of the personality of Cheshire Brew House in 2020 as well.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Shane loves a video, doesn't he? Let's be honest. And he, every now and again, will get on there and he'll wear his colours on his sleeve.
Yeah, we get a bit of personality from him. But yeah, I mean, you and I were massively looking forward to Govinda again, having loved it a couple of years ago.
And we weren't disappointed, were we?
No, we were not disappointed. But before we had the Govinda, we were lucky enough to do the Gibraltar Porter when we had Nat on the show.
Mm.
Oh, that was still amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Mate, that beer, I've had that a few times since, and it just keeps getting better and better. I've got one tucked away for my 50 beers for 50 years thing that I'm doing, and every time I open the larder door, it's there. I'm going to have to hide it at the back because otherwise I'm going to drink it drunkenly one night.
I'm not surprised because not only is it superb, it's so drinkable.
Yeah. Yeah. And that does not taste its 8%.
No, it definitely doesn't. And Leon C, they're local to me. I've got to know the people there. We're lucky that our friend Matt works there now. And, Matt is part of our bottle share crowd. We've known Matt for years. So when I go there, I feel like I'm going to somewhere that I really like. I love their beers, whether it be cask, draft, bottle, can, and they do all of them. But again, their Legra Pale Ale, which is effectively a single hop Citra American Pale Ale at 3.8%, is off the charts good.
That beer is ridiculously drinkable.
Yeah. And they brought out a bigger version, an X version, which is 6% plus. And if I remember correctly, your check-in just said grapefruit, and spot on that was. But
Can I just give a massive shout out to Leon C, and it might have been what you was just about to say, for their SS9.
Yes.
Just being the most drinkable imperial stout you're ever going to come across.
Yeah, I mean, I think we tried it for the first time as part of where we did the recording with them, but I've had it a few times since. But the transition to can,
putting that beer in a can has been possibly the best thing that ever happened to it.
Yeah, that's bloody fantastic.
Yeah.
But also, just one more shout out for them. They also are part of the Bipper comeback as well with their Crowstone.
Oh, Crowstone is a good beer.
Yeah. But yeah, because they're literally, if I go the long way round, I can get a 5-mile walk in before I get there and feel like I've earned a few of those #beer points. It just becomes a really nice environment. Like everyone else, they're suffering, but their beers were always good. But again, bit like we've said with Elusive Brew and with Cheshire Brew House, they've really stepped up with their small pack. They're smashing some of those beers.
Mm.
So yeah, 2 honourable mentions, Cheshire Brew House and Leon C. What would be your 2 honourable mentions, Steve?
So first one's the Colonel, purely on the fact that they have at least 4 beers that made it into my Beer of the Year contender list.
Really?
Yeah. And also just because consistency, you see that brown label, you've got to buy it unless it's got the word Sabro on it, obviously. They're just good at what they do.
No, they're not good. They're great.
Yeah.
They're great at what they do.
Yeah.
So let's put the Sabro to one side because that's us rather than them, to coin a phrase. You're right. And like I said, when they transitioned to having an online shop, I've done I think I've done at least 2 orders, and it was both 24 bottles, both times.
I don't blame you. I mean, I'm lucky enough to be able to pick them up from 2 Brews in Colchester that gets a regular supply. But their beer that's really stood out for me this year has been, and it's not a new beer, it's a beer that they've kind of always brewed, is the Imperial Brown Stout, London.
Oh, I did the other week.
Whatever it is, yeah.
1856, I think.
Yeah, I had it last night as my first beer on my 12 beers of Christmas, just because it's so good. It is so good. That beer is brilliant.
I actually took a active decision to not put Colonel in my list this year for no other reason than I think they've probably appeared somewhere in the Beer of the Year contenders and mentions for me over the years. But that's only because I took.
Wrong with that, though.
No. That's only because I took that decision.
Yeah.
I actively wanted to give a few other shout outs, but their beers are just fantastic. They are still on the list. They are still on the contender list, and the Imperial Brown Stout London 1856 is the one on that list.
Yeah.
You know, it's between 9.5% and 10%, depending which iteration you get.
Depending on how they feel.
Yeah.
Or what day of the week it is. Something ridiculous like that.
Yeah. What star sign it is. And every time that beer delivers.
Yeah, it's a brilliant beer, and they're a great brewery, and I don't think we'll find anyone that would disagree with that. My other one is, and I don't know if I kind of erred on the side of, I think Martin's going to go a bit left field with these suggestions. So some of the breweries that I want to get a mention, I think Martin will mention. My other honourable mention is Thornbridge, and I know there are probably listeners going, "Oh, fuck off, Steve, come on," but no, I mean that they brought back West Coast with Pondera. I went to Leeds and I drank a pint of cask Jaipur.
Sorry, you're not coming through. You're on mute. Sorry.
And it's still the most amazing cask beer that you're ever going to drink. I've subscribed to their beer club and I've not been disappointed yet. What Thornbridge do is just really, really consistent beer. Really, really tasty beer, and beer that's accessible at a price point for everyone, and that's what I love about Thornbridge.
Their beers online. I mean, obviously they've done their Thornbridge Beer Club now. I think the third box is coming out, or fourth box. And you referenced your pint of Jaipur, and I think on the upcoming Beer Nation, Laura references her and Jim going to the Sheffield Tap, literally to have Jaipur and cask.
More spoilers.
And I think if you'd seen my face on Zoom at that particular point, it was almost like I was crying.
Didn't I message you and say your face at what Laura just said?
It's just the way she described the beer and the tap room, the bar at the Sheffield Tap. It was. You are right. They do. I mean, that Pondera was fantastic, and also pairing up with Firestone Walker. Some of the beers they're now delivering, they do appeal to people. They appear in different places. You know, there are certain of those beers which are tailor-made for beer shops. They have beers which are tailor-made for supermarkets now. That's proven. I mean, that's 4 or 5 of their core range are supermarket beers. But I would say, for me, I haven't noticed any change in quality.
No,
the quality's there.
I've not noticed a single change in that.
I still like the fact that as part of my grocery shop, I can pick up 2 4-packs of Jaipur and spend £9. I can't get Jaipur and cask where I live. I can't get Jaipur on tap. Even in less restricted times, I can't get those 2 beers.
That's the closest you're going to get to it as well, isn't it?
And for them to be able to do that and still get that quality. But yeah, some of those beers they're delivering now, and to bring back Raven as well, the black IPA. Even if I had missed the original Thornbridge tweet, I wouldn't have missed your retweeting and commenting anyway, Steve, and your absolute love for that beer coming out. So no, I see no problem with that at all. Like I said, there's a lot of love for breweries like Burning Sky who do something a little bit different. And I think there's no reason why a brewery that consistently delivers. You've named 2 breweries that consistently deliver there.
And that's massively important to me as a consumer.
Well, it's money. You pay your money.
I want consistency in what I'm drinking. I don't, especially at the moment where I've spent the majority of the last 12 months only earning 80% of my salary. I want to make sure that money that I'm spending on beer is going into beer that I am going to enjoy.
You don't want any drain pours, and let's face it, you'd be damn unlucky to get drain pours with either of those two breweries you referenced, mate.
Exactly that. So let's move on to our brewery of the year. Martin, who's yours?
Brew York.
I had a sneaking suspicion you were going to say that.
I was a bit eloquent, I think, earlier, probably more eloquent than I'll be now. After the last three beers, the Big Eagle 2020 blew me away as a West Coast IPA. I did correct you about, I pointed out the Big Eagle versus the Big Eagle 2020 because they brought the ABV down for the competition to get it into a particular style category. The 2020 is a superior version of that beer. And it was fantastic. But the reason they've got my vote isn't because of the Big Eagle 2020. It's because they do a gooseberry fruited beer called Goose Willis, which I just fucking adore.
Excellent. I love that.
I have no idea. If you had told me, but not only in 2020 would I have a list of 17 beers with 14 different styles, but one of them was a gooseberry beer, I would go, yeah, what you on about? Seriously, even back in 2016 when we started, I would have gone, what you on about? That gooseberry beer is so good. They've got the right balance between the gooseberry fruitiness, and my nan used to make gooseberry preserves, so I can sort of remember it, and it's definitely a memory of mine. The sweetness, the drinkability, and it's just over 5%. I've got no idea how they do it. No idea how that magic works to deliver that beer in that way. And also the name of the beer, Goose Willis. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Which Brew York definitely have a way with the naming of their beers.
They are on point with their puns. That's all we need to say.
It's in the right place. They pitch it in the right place as well. And I can't wait to go back to York. I can't wait to go and meet Lee and talk about the brewery, see the new facility they've got, the new premises, and drink at that tap room. Whether I'll get the Big Eagle 2020, I don't know, but the Goose Willis I'm confident of. I can't wait. So yeah, Brew York is my brewery of the year.
Okay, so that's what I thought you would go with. So let's see how much we know each other. Who do you think I've gone with?
I hadn't actually given much thought who you'd go with. I'm gonna say Elusive.
You are bang on, mate. We are literally like Mr. and Mrs. here right now.
For the older listeners.
Yeah, it's absolutely Elusive for me. Not just because Oregon Trail is an amazing beer, but because, and not just because Andy is the nicest man you're ever going to meet, but because he runs a fairly small brewery in the scale of things.
It is small. He's round the corner from Siren, mate.
Yeah, and he transitioned very quickly to doing an online offering. I bought beers early on in the year from him, maybe sort of May sort of time, some bottled selection, and every one of them, the Level Up, the Overdrive, the Spellbinder, it was almost like drinking cask from a bottle. The conditioning that he had got on the beers was perfect. He then transitioned into cans and bought out Oregon Trail, and that Oregon Trail blew me away. Not only did Oregon Trail blow me away in cans, Spellbinder, in terms of it being a coffee porter, probably one of my favourite coffee porters of all time has always been Magic Rock's Common Grounds. Spellbinder blew that out of the park. It was just incredible.
That's a big shout for you.
Yeah, and he's continued to produce fantastic beer in small packs. 4 times now I've had to rearrange my trip to his tap room, and I'm hoping that I do eventually get there, because I just want to go, and I actually want to buy that man a beer. I want to buy that man one of his own beers, because he deserves it. Without a doubt for me this year, Elusive are absolutely my brewery of the year.
Yeah, although I hadn't prepared for that question, it's not a shock, but everything you've said is spot on. Everything you've said about Andy and the beers, and I think we've always said that we think he's an excellent brewer anyway. There has been a step up this year.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And you're right about when I said about Cheshire Brew House, I think they were one of the first ones where I felt like I could picture myself drinking this. This is a cask beer, but in a can. Andy's done the same.
Mate, and Andy made you enjoy a pumpkin beer. That deserves an award in its own in its own right.
That's true. What award category do we need to come up with for that one? But yes, Andy has churned out some fantastic beers this year. And I love the branding. I love the different iterations of Level Up. I love the Lord Nelson. And
I didn't even mention that. The Lord Nelson this year, fucking amazing.
Yeah.
That beer is so good.
That's what I'm saying. He stepped up.
And I don't like farmhouse beers.
No. But again, he's not trying to shock you.
No.
He's picked a style. I think because that's the one with Nelson Sauvin, isn't it?
Yeah.
That Nelson Sauvin balances off some of that farmyard funk that you're not a fan of.
Yeah. What I'm most excited about is the fact that he's bringing back Level Up Level 1, which is the beer that started it all for him. That was
the winner, wasn't it?
Yeah, and that's coming in cans soon, and I absolutely need that in my life.
Yes,
because that was, as you say, that was the beer that started it for.
Yeah,
for
I'm with you on that one. Yeah, so yes,
yeah. So very excited about that. I'm
finished.
I've finished my Fuller's Vintage Ale.
So, God, final thoughts on the Fuller's Vintage Ale before we get to our winners.
Well, it's really drinkable now. That's all I'm going to say. No, it's got there's a lot going on in that now. There's lots of flavors going on. It is fruitcake. It's boozy fruitcake, but it's also really, really. There's a light sort of citrus bitterness on the finish as well. Yeah. It's developed really well over the last year.
I think it's like I said, it now feels like it belongs in the Fuller's Vintage Ale range.
Yeah. Whereas before it didn't. Yeah.
It felt like a bit of an outlier before. It felt like they were trying to shoehorn a beer into that range, whereas now it feels part of the family.
Yes. Yeah.
It's if you give this to me blind tasting, maybe not after 3 beers, but maybe as a first beer, I'd go. I may not say it's a Fuller's Vintage 2019, but I would liken it to a Fuller's Vintage beer because it's now in the same realm. And yes, we did drink it a bit too quickly, probably again, Steve.
Probably, but it's the end of year.
Fortunately, we still have a beer to go.
We do. So we've still got to do our beers of the year, and we've got to do the biggest announcement of all, which is number one fan. But we need probably one more beer to get us through that.
Well, of course we do.
This is Signature Brew's Anthology. It's their annual Imperial Stout. This is the 2020 version coming in at 10%. We're very grateful, again, to have been sent this by Signature Brew. But this is a beer that both you and I absolutely love, isn't it? And I don't think it's the first time we've done it on a podcast either.
No, I think it's been on one of the opinions on films.
Yeah,
in the past. It's a beast of a beer. It's another 10% Imperial Stout.
It poured out of the can like fucking tar.
Yeah,
which is actually what I want from an Imperial Stout.
It's dark. It's thick. It feels like it's going to be a boozy number, mate. Should we get into this?
Let's get in. Cheers.
Cheers. Oh, coffee straight away in the nose.
Oh, coffee, dark chocolate, licorice on that mouthfeel. It is thick.
Yeah.
It does coat the mouth.
There's almost a bit of that tobacco ash kind of note to it, especially at the back end.
It's like a 70 or 80% dark chocolate as well.
Yeah, it's not an easy eating dark chocolate.
No, but the finish is really soft. You get all that up front, and then you actually get what's for a beer of this stature, you get quite an easy finish.
Yeah, I mean, we were quite lucky. These actually landed the day of recording, didn't they, for us?
Yeah. And these, we were only going to do 3 beers tonight, listeners, but fuck it, we thought we'd give you the full extravaganza.
Yeah, it's a Monday. What could go wrong?
Let's talk beers of the year then. So again, we're going to do 2 honourable mentions and a winner.
Yeah, and this may be where one of the surprises turn up, which I referenced a couple of days ago on Twitter after a virtual online work beer tasting. A New England IPA has made it into my honourable mentions.
I don't think I'm surprised, actually. I think you've been more generous with your New England leaning in the last year.
Yes, but this one from Track called I Dance Like This was a proper... It showcased all of those good things about New England IPA. It didn't showcase gloop. It didn't showcase juice. It didn't showcase way too much sweetness. It was balanced. It was drinkable. It's the kind of beer you would give to someone who says, I don't like beer.
Okay. It
was really, really good. And it was a big favourite on the night for the virtual beer tasting we had by the time I released a week or so ago. And it did pretty much blow me away. It reminded me of some of those beers I had from Trillium when I was in Boston a couple of years ago. Bloody brilliant. Really, really good. If you can get hold of it, it's worth a shout, mate.
It's nice to hear that, and I'm sure our listeners will appreciate this as well, that we've got a New England IPA in there, because we're not that way leaning, are we, generally?
No, that's probably why it blew me away, because it hit all the right notes.
And what's your other honourable mention this year, mate?
Okay, less of a departure. Pliny for President from Russian River.
Yeah, it was a good beer.
We managed to get some, Michelle and myself, and sent one over to your good self.
Big thumbs up. Yeah.
Although it's not the literal Pliny, the original, it was a damn good IPA. I mean, I think it's referenced as a double IPA.
DDH
but
version of Pliny, yeah.
It wasn't a DDH that we've perhaps become accustomed to over here, which is almost like a New England amped up version of a beer. This had all of the right stuff amped up. Balanced bitterness, balanced piney, balanced resinous. And I waxed lyrical on my Untapped check-in, and Mr. UNRCD said, why didn't I give it a 5? And I said, I think it's probably just because I wasn't having it at the source.
Time and place.
Yeah. Time and place. Yeah. I was having it at home on a bit of a damp autumn evening rather than on the west coast of America at the tap room. I mean, it would have got a 5+, seriously. And also I would have had Pliny, the original as well. So, yeah, that I think me and Michelle managed to get 3 cans for us. I think we sent one to you and one to Clayton, our esteemed creative director. I loved it. It was a superbly drinkable beer. What, about 8.5%? Bloody fantastic. And one can only imagine what Pliny's like off the back of that.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant beer. Yeah, and I'm very appreciative that you managed to get one over to me. So I'll do my 2 honourable mentions, and then we'll do our beers of the year. I think so. My first honourable mention was a real late entry to this, and that is from a brewery that has been mentioned many times this evening, Utopian's CERN Specialny. Their black lager absolutely blew me away. When I opened it, poured it, I smelled it, I got the aroma, I drank it, and I was like, fuck me, that is incredible. And I downed the pint of it in probably record time, and then bought a lot of it after. It's just a great beer. It's just, and I think possibly you summed it up in one of your Untapped check-ins, which was your benchmark for that style is Budvar, and that excelled it. I absolutely agree. CERN Specialny from Utopian. It's almost like they said, right, we're going to have a great year of beers that we're going to release, but what we're going to do is we're going to wait right until the end of the year, and we're going to release this absolute banger, which is what they did.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I know that Budvar and the CERN Speciality aren't quite the same style, but it's still my benchmark. If we're talking about in general terms, a black lager versus a black lager. We have both talked about our love for the Budvar Dark. And we've had quite a lot of it this year. And referencing what we said earlier, when we had the table full of meat back in February, we both were drinking the Budvar Dark.
Yeah.
And loved it and still do. But yes, the Cernay Speciale went, okay, I see you. This is what I can do.
Yeah.
And went, bang, here you go.
Just a great beer. So good. And hats off to Utopian for bringing that out.
And it's still a lager.
And it's the right time of the year for it as well, though.
But it's still lager.
It is. And you still get those lager characteristics from it. But
That's
then you get
so
a nice, you get a bit of a warm hug at the end from it, which is what I love. My other honourable mention is, again, a beer that has been mentioned many, many times this evening, and that's the Big Eagle 2020, which was a beer that made me realise what was missing in West Coast IPA, and that was malt. And it was the malt profile. And personally loved the fact that part of their reason for brewing that beer was because they listened to us and because they took a little bit of inspiration from what we were saying in terms of West Coast IPAs.
Which I have to admit, I'd forgotten a little bit about, but was very, very pleasing to hear. And yeah, it was, seriously, it was such a good beer, along with all the other good beers that they're doing, along with all the good branding that they're doing. And even the box they send out with the beer has a 10% off at the tap room.
Yeah.
So,
but even the box is branded as well.
Yeah.
So you know what it is when it appears.
One day when we go to that tap room, we still, they've said to you, turn up, you've got 10% off. Whatever round you're buying, you've got 10% off. I have nothing else to add about Big Eagle 2020. We are close to our winners, Steve.
Well, we are. That's all that's left.
Am I going first? I'll tell you what, let's turn it around. You go first this time.
Okay. I don't think this is going to be a surprise to anyone. Not a single person is going to be surprised at what I'm about to say. But for me, my beer of 2020 is Oregon Trail by Elusive Brew.
No.
Yes, absolutely.
Sorry, I have almost not fallen off my seat.
The first batch was it almost took what Big Eagle had done for West Coast IPA, but by the fact that it brought the ABV down by a couple of percent, made it so much drinkable. The second batch took it to a new level for me. That bitter, that bitterness on the end, that resiny, piney, bitter, sticky finish is just everything I want from a beer. And I absolutely love Oregon Trail. And I really hope that Andy introduces that as part of his core range, because it needs to be. It is almost the UK exemplar of the style, as far as I'm concerned.
I think, given the amount of love that's been displayed for this beer across both the batches, plenty of engagement, yes, it should be part of the core range now. That should be, Spellbinder, Oregon Trail, Overdrive, Level Up.
Yeah, that's what we want. That's what we want from Elusive. So
you'd order that mixed case, wouldn't you?
Absolutely. I'd order that mixed case on a subscription basis.
Yeah, just regularly.
Give me that every month.
Yeah, just turn up
that's
all
what
the time.
Yeah.
I think that's a fantastic choice, mate.
So, what's yours?
I've gone a bit not left field in terms of style, but left field in terms of beer, because it's generally I try to think of beers that we could all have. I've gone for one partly because of that Provenance where we were. So 12th of February in Prague, in that place, the Craft House in Prague. And do you remember, we suddenly discovered that the Czechia did a whole load of West Coast IPAs. And we went up to the bar and there was another one. Went up to the bar, there was another one. When I say there was another one which was a couple of feet up in ABV. So it kept on increasing. I've gone for Gunslinger. For Pivovar Raven, West Coast IPA, but you and I absolutely loved. It was smooth, it was clean, it was crisp. It necessarily didn't quite have the backbone, necessarily the multi backbone of, say, Elusive or Big Eagle 2020, But I think because you, me, Tim, Josh and Alice were in that bar a few minutes before it was going to go from the 12th to the 13th of February, where my birthday was, it was just a wonderful moment. And I probably think back even more lovingly on that as well since then. And literally those West Coast IPAs that the Czechias do were fantastic that day. We tasted some really, really good examples of the style. But just sitting at a little table, 5 of us, I can't wait to get the chance to go back to Prague, go back to the craft house and have a selection of their West Coast IPA, because they're obviously West Coast IPA fans.
Well, I'm not sure it's that, but I just think that Czechia breweries really know how to nail a style. So if you said to them, produce a load of saisons, they'd produce them to the level of Saison DuPont or better. They just concentrate so much on making sure their style is right.
Yeah, then they get it. They go with that advert.
Yeah,
it does what it says on the tin.
Yeah, but what I love is that for both of us, and there's probably a bit of a theme throughout the entire end of year show here, is that we love the fact that West Coast IPAs are back.
Yes, yeah, West Coast IPAs are back, and I prefer, if I had to vote for a style that I wish was back, that would still come above the Bipper comeback.
Yeah, me too. I want West Coast plugged into my veins, please. That's what I want.
A bit like the Matrix.
Yes, because that's the style that I enjoy. It absolutely is.
That's where we found, in inverted commas, craft.
Yeah, and it's been great that we've looked back over that this year, and we've come to that sort of conclusion. So there's really only one more thing to us for us to address, mate, and that is the coveted number one fan title, isn't it?
Yeah, coveted by like 8, 9, 10 people. This took a little bit of work this year, because I think the engagement with people who listen to the show has increased.
It has, and there are different levels of the way that people engage.
Yeah.
And despite a lot of people suggesting there's a spreadsheet, that there is no spreadsheet for this.
This one was
this is gut feeling.
Yeah, this was a feeling, wasn't it? And we both agreed when we sent each other the WhatsApp message. We did nail it straight away. So do you want to announce the winner or people who were part of it?
I think it's only fair to go through the shortlist.
Okay. Do you want to go first? Reel off the names, mate.
I'll reel off the names and then you can announce the winner. Yeah. So first of all, we had Rich at Rich Taylor 1608. We've got Simon at Simo Sloth, despite his hatred for 2 hour plus podcasts.
Well, he's going to be really disappointed this time round.
Yeah, absolutely. Johnny at Johnny Beerboy, James at Gammon Baron, Ian at II Hay, and Michael at Mick McGroarty. So that is our shortlist of number one fan contenders for this year. And between you and I, who did we think deserves that title this year?
It was Michael. Mick McGroarty has engaged with us through various mediums. But you know what I really love about Mick? The way he has joined all of our virtual sessions and will literally
fuck all.
And say fuck all and sit there until he feels the need to say something.
Yeah.
And then it's worth listening to.
And point of reference as well is that Mick is the first person to ever regain the number one fan title as well, because Mick was a winner of he was a holder of number one fan for a good couple of years in the early days of the Beer O'Clock Show. So
I tell you what, that's, there's not many people can say that, Steve. In fact, only the one.
There is only the one.
It's a bit like Highlander.
There can be only one, and this year, Mick, that is you. So revel in I don't even know what the words are anymore.
The ready Brett glow of being the Hopinions number one fan.
Indeed. I'm feeling like the wheels are rapidly coming off of this machine. I'm almost at the end of my anthology.
So am I.
It's such a delicious beer, isn't it?
Yeah, I have to admit, thank you very much to Signature Brew for sending this through to us. But could you have sent us a second one, because this one's gone way too quick?
It's so good.
You say it's 440 milliliters, but it's gone very quickly.
It's so good. So, what's coming up next time, mate?
Well, Beer Nation. We've referenced it more than once. This was the collaboration of all collaborations between podcasters. We're not going to name them all because I think we did it on one of the other shows, and I'm sure you listen to other beer podcasters who have referenced the names. That will be landing, I think, Boxing Day, Steve?
Yes, it's out on Boxing Day. It should be on everybody's feeds, so you shouldn't be able to miss it, to be honest with you.
Yeah. And I have listened back to both edits. It's a fantastic listen. Despite me and Steve being a major part of it, it's still a fantastic listen. There's some cracking content, some really good points raised, and it's a pretty good summing up of 2020. And then it's back to us. First week of January, it'll be landing again.
Yep, we're not sure what's going on that first show in the new year, but it'll come soon. Just to finish up this end of year extravaganza, just a few thank yous, as is a customary to do. Martin, thank you for putting up with my continuous I've got an idea and spreadsheets. It's what keeps us going as a podcast. I want to thank all of the breweries that have sent us beer this year. We never take any of that for granted. It's always a real pleasure to receive what you send us. I'd love to be able to feature everything that we get sent on a podcast, but it's logistics just doesn't make that possible. So hopefully wherever possible, we've been able to give you a shout out, but thank you so much for supporting what we do. But finally, the biggest thank you is obviously to our listeners. You are the reason why we continue to do this. And I said it earlier on, because without you folks, we're nothing. If you don't engage in what we do, we've got no content to put out. So thank you for continuing to get involved. And all I want to do is to firstly wish Martin and your family the happiest of Christmases, and to wish all of our listeners a very happy Christmas and best wishes for the new year. Cheers.
Cheers, Steve.
If I knew back then what I know